In the previous video, we talked about how to solve almost any algebra equation with just three simple steps. But all of these steps assume that x is already in the numerator on one side of the equation, like these two equations, for example. If you try to use these three steps to solve these equations or any equations like these, then everything will work perfectly. But what happens if we have something like this, where x is in the denominator? Well, if we try to apply the steps to solve that, then we're going to actually come up with something that's pretty confusing. So let me show you what I mean by that. So for step one here, we look on the right side of the equation and see that we're multiplying by 6. So multiplying by 6 is one operation. Step two would be to do the inverse of that to both sides. So we're going to end up with 3 divided by 6 equals 6 divided by x, also divided by 6. And the 6 will cancel. And then finally, what we're going to end up with is basically 1/2 equals 1 divided by x. Remember, x is still in the denominator. Now, this is correct algebraically, and this is the correct solution, but it might be confusing what x actually equals. You might think that x equals 1/2 here, when in fact it actually equals 2. And the way you can think about that is by seeing that x and 2 are both in the denominator, and then 1 and 1 are obviously in the numerator, so they have to match up. In order to avoid this confusion, I recommend doing one step before you try to apply this three steps from the previous video if you see a problem like this with x in the denominator. The first step that I would do for this is to multiply both sides by x. Just start. So if you multiply both sides by x, then you can see what happens here. So here on the right-hand side, the x's cancel out. And on the left side, we'll be left with 3x. So we'll be left with now 3x equals 6. And now you can see that x is in the numerator, so we can solve this the normal way, with the three steps that we're used to. So if we listed these out, I won't go through all of the steps again, but basically we have multiplication by 3, so we'll have to divide both sides by 3. And then if we go through that, we will end up with x equals 2. So this is what I recommend in order to make sense of equations where you have x in the denominator. Otherwise, things can just get too confusing. Now, this falls into the bucket of the 10% of algebra problems that you cannot solve. Using the three steps from before, those will allow you to solve 90% of problems, but 10% of problems you can't solve. So stick around as we go over some of the other types of problems that can't exactly be solved with those three steps.